All right. So question 11, the firms in an industry all produce a homogeneous product, but each firm is able to influence the price it charges for its own product. So I don't think you can say this is this is a case of perfect competition because well their price they're able to influence the price. I don't think you can say this is a monopolistic competition because a very key characteristic of monopolistic competition was product differentiation. I don't think you can call this monopoly because clearly there are more than one firm. There's more than one firm in the industry, in the market. So you can have to call this an oligopoly. So let's say this: there are like 5 to 6 firms and like negligible amount of other small firms. They're just five to six big firms, and we had learned that an oligopoly could be those 5 to 6 big firms that can influence the price because they do have a lot of market power, and they could produce differentiated products or they could produce homogeneous products. So the products still had to be similar at the very least. So if they produce homogeneous products, well, that definitely is the case of oligopoly. The diagram shows the cost and revenue curves of a monopoly. What is the firm's objective if it produces output OX? So OX here. Oh yeah, and this is obviously the point where MR is equals to 0. When MR is 0, TR is maximized. So it's gonna be to maximize total revenue. That is very clear. The table shows information about a profit maximizing firm. What can be concluded about the firm's behavior? Um, so the price per unit is 1.70 and the variable cost per unit is 1.75. So the idea here is the price is basically the additional revenue that you're earning. It's kind of like your marginal revenue that you're getting for every unit that you sell. Your variable costs per unit are again your marginal costs. So here your marginal costs are greater than your marginal revenue. Um, or a simpler way to look at it is just that the money it's earning from the price uh, doesn't even help it to cover. It's like not covering even its variable, even its variable costs. When you're not covering your variable costs, you should close down. That is for sure. Um, it, we don't need to look at fixed costs because we only look at variable costs, whether or not it's covering variable costs. So not average cost, it's variable costs. That is D. So you can still produce less than average costs and still continue production in the short run, hoping that you will cover for that in the long run. But in the short run, if you're not even covering your variables, that is when you shut down, not just when you're not covering your average costs. So even if you're not covering fixed costs, it's fine in the short run at least. When will a society have achieved an equitable distribution of income? When all individuals have equal job opportunities. I don't know. Let's look at the others. When all workers are paid wages equal to their marginal revenue product, well, different people could have different marginal revenue products. So you could have different.
It's not revenue product, it's value product. There's a difference.
Okay, sorry. Marginal value. So what's that?
It's like the value that is associated with the product itself, not the revenue that you are getting it from it. But like there's a very slight difference. It's like कि जो product की actual value है ना उसके हिसाब से you are being paid, not the revenue that you are earning from it.
Okay, so that kind of links to when you could have like non-price benefits, like external benefits or something of that sort from that product. Anyhow, but if so A and B, well, B you can quickly cross out because well different people would have different marginal value products, so it wouldn't necessarily be a fair distribution of income. When the incomes within society are equally distributed, well, this is a very so the idea of equity is fairness. So it's like fair distribution of income. uh, Whether that coincides with equality is, I don't know if I'm overthinking this. Shreya, what do you think? Do you think we can go with C?
यार अब the only issue with this is कि like I don't think it's very realistic. मुझे लग रहा है कि मतलब it doesn't make that much sense क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा एक यूटोपियन आंसर है कि like हाँ अगर सब कुछ ऐसा हो जाए.
I don't think the
Like
examiner cares about whether this is realistic or not. I mean,
because like do societies मतलब if it is not possible तो फिर do societies not reach an equitable distribution?
well, no, I don't believe you. I don't believe you see anyone with a Gini coefficient of 0. Like, I don't think that's realistically happens. Anyhow, let's
हाँ
cross up.
होना
Let's
I
cross.
think this
Um.
should be correct because like equal job opportunities से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
Anyhow, but what would you can't cross out D when society believes that the distribution of income is fair. Um. Oh wait, can we cross out D? So society believes. Who
हाँ
cares what
but I
society?
believes ना तो मतलब अगर नहीं भी हो society believes तो
Yeah,
maybe they're
yeah.
wrong.
Society is dumb. Okay. Um. If you're left with A and C, when all individuals have equal job opportunities, so well, if they have equal job opportunities, um,
ये तो गलत हो सकता है because if a person is sweeper और एक बंदा कोई बहुत amazing job कर रहा है तो
but that's the thing. The idea between equity is fairness. So if incomes are equally distributed, if you go full communistic, like, is that necessarily fair? Uh, or if you have equal job opportunities and then whoever makes the most out of those opportunities gets the income, is that more fair? Equitable is like fair or like just in a way.
that I don't get why you crossed out B.
When all workers are paid wages equal to the marginal value product,
मतलब
um,
even if you consider it to be MRP सही है. So if people are being paid according to that,
if people are being paid according to their marginal revenue product, but because then if you're working in an industry that like has sells tobacco, something in elastic that sells, let's say, tobacco, and that has, well, I'm not sure about the price of tobacco, but let's assume you're working in an industry that has really really high prices for the product because it's inelastic, then your MRP would be higher even though you haven't worked that much. So that's why I kind of crossed out B, because it's not just your productivity. Now the MRP doesn't just depend on your marginal physical product; it also depends on the price. Uh, so, or whatever the value in this case, like whatever, same thing. But so just because of the nature of the product, you could be working as hard, but someone else is getting paid more because they work in an industry that just has a product that by nature just has a higher price or higher value.
I would go for C वैसे इसमें मतलब.
Okay, man. Like, so make a lot. So I'd say A, you would say C. Let's hope.
मुझे
I
सिर्फ एक चीज समझ नहीं आ रही कि लाइक अगर इक्वल अपॉर्चुनिटीज भी हैं सही है. You and I both, assuming that there were two jobs in the economy, you and I both had the opportunity to become to get the higher paid job. You got it, I didn't get it. सही है. अब now after that तुम्हारी इनकम ज्यादा होगी मेरी कम होगी तो फिर is the distribution of income in society equitable, sorry.
it's not equal, but is it equitable? Is it fair that if someone is better suited for the job and he got the better paying job, um,
The
I
only problem is कि मतलब I don't see it's realistic और मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा कि ऐसा नहीं हो सकता मतलब तो it doesn't make sense. लेकिन A में मुझे अलग मसला है तो I'd go for C.
anyhow, so guys, we'll get back to this particular question after we check our answers. So do refer to the end of the video to see which option was right, because we check our answers after every 10 MCQs. Anyhow, so 15, the government introduces a minimum wage above the equilibrium market rate. Okay, how will this affect low paid workers? So your minimum wage, if you look at your demand for labor, your supply of labor, this is your minimum wage. It can only be above this, can't be below this. So the market wage, it will have, so the wage people are being paid at the market, the wage that you're paying low paid workers, that'll have to increase. All those in employment will receive a new guaranteed minimum wage. No, as you can clearly see from the diagram here. Well, I haven't drawn it properly, but
D makes sense.
what?
E पढ़ लो directly, it makes sense.
Fewer of those not already in employment.
D, 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 D.
Yeah, well, D makes sense, but we have to go through all the options. Because if you look at this, this is your quantity initially, but now it will contract to something like this. So people will lose their job. Fewer of those not already in employment will enter the labor force. In fact, more people might enter the labor force, maybe because there's a higher wage rate going around, not fewer. There will be an increase in the number. Well, there won't be increase in employment. There will be decrease, in fact, and that's what we ticked in D. Um, a country's steel producers are members of a cartel. Okay, and steel producers. So each member is allocated a production quota and initially produces the maximum allowed under its quota. What will be the effects on productive efficiency and on the industry's profits if the producers are allowed to trade the quotas amongst themselves? So I think productive efficiency should improve, right? Because then, depending on the each particular producer's cost structure and its marginal, its minimum efficient scale, and the shape of its average cost, they would just like figure out how much they want to produce. Like, let's say was my quota is like this much, it's this much quantity, but I only want to produce this much so that I come to minimum average cost. I believe trading would help productive
And
efficiency,
benefits would also increase.
and profits will also increase, because if trading helps you to produce in a point where you're at your minimum average cost, since costs decrease, then profits, then profits should also increase, uh, because then you're just selling at a particular price in a cartel. So the price is the same, but your costs have gone down, so your profits should increase. um, which government policy would not be classified as regulation? Bans, well, I'm sure bans classify as regulation. Compulsory wearing of, well, that if compulsory wearing you are regulating. uh, Licenses for the extraction of water, well, licenses is also regulation. um, then I guess taxes are not a form of regulation, one would say. Do you agree with that?
बाकी सब तो I get कि हाँ देश
Yeah.
अगर tax applied you would rather not consume it.
Yeah, I mean, with taxation, I mean, it's still up to you. At the end of the day, you can either pay the higher price for tobacco and cigarettes, or you can not consume. I mean, it's still not, you're still
For
not directly regulating.
for like cigarettes and tobacco, they have an inelastic demand to वो तो फिर भी शायद चलो सही है. But if it was something else, then would you consider taxation as a regulation?
I still wouldn't, because at the end of the day, it's like, whether it's elastic or inelastic, it's still up to the consumer, right? Like, they can either pay the higher price or they cannot. In inelastic products like cigarettes and tobacco, they most probably would pay the higher price. In other cases, they most probably wouldn't. But that in the case of elastic products, but at the end of the day, it's still like this choice whether to suffer through the higher price or to not consume has been left to the consumer, right?
As in licensing, are you sure?
Licenses for their extraction. Yeah, I
हाँ
mean,
भाई.
if you have to get a license, and then there's a particular, say,
हाँ.
standard for the license. Like, other things being equal, the money supply in an open economy will increase if domestic banks increase their lending to foreign borrowers. If they lend to foreign borrowers, how will that increase money supply in the particular domestic economy? The central bank buys foreign currency in the foreign exchange market. Well, that might increase the supply of the currency in the foreign exchange market. I'm not too sure if that will increase the supply um, in the particular economy itself. Um, the government sells bonds to domestic residents. Well, no, because if the government, if this is the government and this is the residents, and the government is giving them bonds, I don't know what I wrote. Okay, the government is giving them bonds, residents are giving them money. So that clearly means that the money supply is going down, because bonds are basically being used to absorb the money, the liquidity in the domestic economy. It's going to the government. There's an increase in the volume of of imports to the economy. Well, this should be wrong, because if you increase the volume of imports, that means you're really paying people outside the economy. So
I
in
think it
that,
should be yes.
yeah, I think so as well. And I think the reason why it's B is because this is an open economy. So if the supply of your currency goes up in the foreign exchange market, that is also likely to leak into uh, it likely to result in a higher supply of that same currency in your domestic market as well. It's just available more everywhere then. So that could be the logic that you use. And anyways, all the other three options were definitely incorrect. Anyhow, which is not an injection into a country's circular flow of national income. So your injections are basically um, investment in two sector, then you have government in three sector, government expenditure, sorry, and then you have export revenue that you've earned in a four sector economy. So inward direct investment is an injection. Private gross domestic fixed capital formation. I guess if you're forming capital, that is also investment. Investment is basically the addition to capital stock. So if you're forming capital, that happens due to investment, so you can cross that out as well. The sale of government bonds to members of uh, the public. So if you're, I would say that could be fine, because if you're selling government bonds to members of the public, in fact, if anything, that could be a leakage rather than an injection, because then money is going from the public to the government. There's no, it's not investment or government expenditure.
But
Because
I said that if you look at D,
yeah,
I don't think this is an injection either.
I
Or
would
is it?
say it is, because I would say this is government expenditure
As a civil servant.
to civil servants, right? So it's still government expenditure, I would say, which is why you can cross out D, and C would be your right answer, because just because the government is giving you bonds doesn't mean that wouldn't classify as government expenditure. It doesn't classify as investment, obviously. Definitely not export revenue, so you can just pick that. 20, the national income is initially in equilibrium if there is, and so national income is in equilibrium. In you could look at this in two ways. I'm not sure which one the question wants, but one is where, where your aggregate expenditure is equals to your national income, then you're in equilibrium then, or injections are equal to withdrawals. So let's see which one this wants. If there is an increase in exports, which change of equivalent value will restore national income to its initial equilibrium level? And looking at the options, I believe they're looking at something of this sort. So increase in exports means injections went up, and they want to see how a change of an equivalent value will restore national income to its initial level. So if you look at this, I believe it can be B, because if you decrease investment, then that's an equivalent value. It decreases your injections, so your overall change is nothing, and hence you're back in equilibrium. On the other hand, if you look at a decrease in imports, that means withdrawals go down, which doesn't make sense, because then one thing is increasing, the other thing is going down. It's definitely not in equilibrium. If you increase government expenditure, that doesn't help either, because then injections go up even more, so even more disequilibrium. If you reduce tax, then again withdrawals go down, so that doesn't help either. So 20B, and let's quickly check our answers for these 10 MCQs. All right, so we checked our answers and we got 14 wrong. In fact, both of us got 14 wrong. The actual answer was not A. It wasn't A. It wasn't even C. But it was D. And I can just show you the examiner report for this, because the examiner report pointed this out, because it was only answered correctly by 14%, which is actually a very, very low number. So it says equitable relates to fairness and not to equality, which is kind of the reason why you can cross out C, because C is like ensuring things are equally distributed, so that's like equality. It is more a subjective interpretation of what society thinks is a fair distribution rather than an objective measurement. So that kind of is the reason why you can cross out the other three options. Like, well, we had already crossed out C, but that's why you can cross out A, B, and C, or because it's not one simple um, benchmark or one simple yardstick that you can compare equity to. The idea of what's fair and what's not is very, very subjective, and which is why Shadiara and I had difficulties agreeing to it, because again, it's subjective. What is really a fair distribution? So because of that, what Cambridge has gone with is, when society itself believes that the distribution of income is fair, when the aggregate opinion in society is that okay, this is fair, because it's subjective, you leave that to society, and that's why you can cross out the other three and conclude with D. Um, so that's it for this video. We'll do the last 10 MCQs for this paper in the next one.